All right, everyone, and we are live on the Gamification Revolution. Hello, hello. I'm Gabe Zickerman, your host. I'm coming to you from the lovely United Club at Newark Airport. I'm on my way to Tallinn in Estonia, which is not in the United States. And joined today by my awesome guest and frequent um, a visitor and participant here at the Gamification Revolution, Sascha Goto. How are you, Sascha?
Thank you, Gabe. I'm very well. Greetings from the sunny West Coast.
Yay, West Coast. Great. So you guys, so happy to have you all here. I apologize in advance if there's any loud noises in the background that you might find frustrating or annoying. I'm going to do my best to keep us engaged and let you hear me during this exciting time. I want to remind you all that in order to participate in today's show, you're going to need to log in with one of your social media credentials. And once you've logged in, you can then chat with us. And you can even come on screen. You can ask us questions, Sascha or I. Obviously, if you've got some questions for either of us about gamification or engagement, this is a great time to ask. Just make sure you log in and then click the question button, and we'll bring your question on screen. And if you've got a camera, click the camera button, and we'll bring your face on screen and get to talk to you and answer your question. And also, for those of you who don't know, Gamification Summit, G Summit, is coming up in just a little while, June 10th through the 13th in San Francisco. We just announced a whole bunch of new speakers. We've got speakers from Google, we've got speakers from Boeing, we have speakers from JetBlue, TWBA, Chiat Day, coming to talk about the amazing Nissan campaign that they've been working on called GT Academy around the world. Very cool. We've got a whole bunch of exciting workshops scheduled. It really is a boosted, larger program than ever before, and it would be great to have you there. And if you're interested in the subject of engagement, it's a great time. Early bird ends next week, so register now at gsummit.com. Okay, Sascha, tell us something. So you're at McKinsey. Tell everybody what it is that
Mhm.
you do at McKinsey and how you are connected to the gamification engagement subject there.
Surely. So I'm an IT program manager in McKinsey. I'm based out of San Francisco. After moving from Düsseldorf in Germany to New York and then to the West Coast. In my role, I'm involved in the research, development, as well as deployment of new products for McKinsey employees, meaning workstation products. For example, I make sure that we gather the user requirements, that we bake them properly into the product and manage a smooth rollout, including the right set of communications and the right training approach. I've been a gamification evangelist, I guess, since mid 2011. And last year, I finally had the opportunity to gamify one of our programs here. Um,
So
from
tell us
I've
about
also
it.
been a game. Sure. So the program that we have a program here at McKinsey, which is called the Testbed program. We have a circle, it's like a limited circle of 160 people all across the globe, mostly consultants, who get the opportunity to test drive new hard and software long before we make any decision whether we really want to roll this out or not. So this is these consultants do this on top of their daily work. It's voluntary, but we also want to make sure that they get engaged and find the time and do contribute. This program has been around for several years. And in the past, we sort of try to measure at the end of each year how much has every participant done, how active he or she has been, and then we try to, maybe give them a reward for that at the end of the year. In the past, this was always done by simply counting the number of projects that they got involved with. So, for example, we have John Smith here, who has apparently piloted or helped us test 13 different products. Whether he made a contribution by providing feedback or not, we weren't entirely sure. But for these 13, we give him 30 points, and then we see how he compares to the others. Obviously, this program, it was the perfect breeding ground to try out a few new things. So last year, I got the chance to introduce a few game mechanics. So instead of just counting the amount of products or tests that they participate, uh, I put up a real scoring system depending on the type of activity. So whether they piloted something, whether they submitted a survey, whether they joined a focus group or an interview, all these different things. And at the same time, we kept score in, well, as real time as we were able to do so, because we did this entirely low tech. And on a regular basis, I published a leaderboard to the entire community, so they could see where they stand across the year in the testbed program. Now, it was super successful. People loved the fact that they were getting much more immediate feedback about their contributions. They loved the fact that they could see how others are doing. And at the end of the year, when we ran the analysis and compared it to how we did against last year, we found that we had a 39% increase in the number of active test bedders. We had a 55% increase in overall engagement, and the average score, if we applied the same scoring mechanism to last year, I mean to 2012, if we compared them on the same level, the average score, we had an increase of 33%. So needless to say, I think it was a huge success. We are now looking into what else we can do this year, and I personally am very super excited about that.
So let me ask you a question, just a general question. Is it hard to get people to do the kind of testing and engagement that you were looking for in the first place? Like, did you start from a place of fairly low participation and achieve that, or were people already kind of well engaged and you boosted it?
Well, typically, I mean, the group consists of about 160 people, as I said initially. But you always have like your typical 10, 20 people who are like the most active ones, and the rest maybe participate once or twice. And we really wanted to get this middle portion up, to get people to do more than just one test, do more than just, oh, that this one bit of hardware that they are personally interested in, but the rest they are not, maybe that doesn't fall entirely into their category. Of course, the other problem, quote unquote, that we have is that we are, quote unquote, fighting against their time commitment with other things, right? As I said, they do this entirely voluntarily. So by providing them this gamified framework, they were much more tied to the entire process of testing. As I said, immediate feedback, or as immediate as we could give it, played a key role here, really.
Was there any concern or pushback, because you talked about the sort of voluntary time issue, which kind of came up when Ryan Mizusaki was talking about training at Delta, this whole idea of getting people to do things that's outside of their like kind of core job description. Has there been any pushback, or have you seen any pushback from management about this whole idea of, hey, Sasha's project is really engaging compared to the person's actual job. So if he does his job really super well, you're going to be stealing time or energy from their core function?
Right. So occasionally we get that from consultants who are saying, my boss or my manager doesn't really want me to spend too much time on testing hardware, but that is actually fairly rare, because they do this essentially in their free time, right, on top of everything else. So as long as their daily work doesn't suffer from testing out new hardware or new software, this is typically not a big problem. No, luckily not.
I, I I always think of that as being one of those things where like it's almost like too good of a problem to have. It's like a great problem if the thing that you designed is so good,
Right.
right? And it's rare that we actually get to that. So Dutch asking this question that I was kind
Mhm.
of getting at, which is, I know you like numbers and numbers are important in your organization, and I want you to talk a little bit about, the selling
Right.
process internally. But Dutch was just asking about, so how did it differ when you were talking about the core group or the non-core group? What were some of the effect differences, and what do you, and not just the stats, but what do you attribute those differences to in the design?
So, as I said, the sheer number of active participants increased by 39%, which means that in 2012 we had 106 people who participated in a minimum of one test or product test, and last year we had 147. I do credit that to the fact that we communicated better probably and more often, and we were also probably, because of the whole gamified framework, more structured in classifying all the different tests. And ultimately, I think that led to the fact that we got more participation. Of course, we also, when we when we reached the end of the year or we were going towards it, we sort of pushed people to this is your chance to maybe move into the top 10 or get active at all. One thing I should add is that we did end up giving out rewards to the active members. The top 10 received a better. We had actually 3 tiers of rewards. So the top 10 received a special reward, then the next 10, and then the rest something smaller. But we did not tell them until the end of the program what those rewards would be. So it wasn't clear whether they, first of all, whether they would be getting anything or what exactly that would be. And I think ultimately that helped us, that people were not thinking, oh, I need to get to the second reward tier because that is what I need. Instead of just leaving it open, we didn't even tell them that the top 10 or versus the top 20 you would get something else, for example.
Let me ask you another question, which is related to that. That's very interesting about the rewards. What about the sort of competition side of this? So many companies are nervous, and many organizations are nervous about introducing competition. I think people are comfortable with it when it's like the sales team, but when it's anything else in the organization, there tends to be some amount of discomfort. I know that McKinsey is a
Mm.
different kind of organization. Can you speak to a little bit the competition and designing for the right level of competitiveness?
So we didn't have too many specific elements regarding competition. As I said, we did have the leaderboard, and with a lot of these things in the beginning, the uptake was rather slow. People weren't really checking the leaderboard because they thought, no, it's not that important. But we did see that towards the end of the year, and actually, I did get emails from people who said, "What else can I do to make it into the top 10?" Or how come that person now beat me for the #1 spot, for example? Um, I didn't see any reactions towards a negative impact, if that is what you're aiming at. Um, so there was nobody who said, oh, there's no way for me to reach a top spot here in this list, so I'm gonna stop trying or so. Not at all.
Well, I meant sort of more like from the management or from HR or from kind of organizationally, because
Oh, I
Dutch
see.
even is talking about this. Yeah, I hear you that you could probably tune it so that it pushed the right buttons with the people. But how does McKinsey compare to, let's say, other, to organizations in their feelings about allowing employees to compete at all?
Hmm. Um, That's hard. I actually can't say much about that. We did not get any, feedback or whatsoever regarding that. Um, so it never actually arose as an issue at all. Not in the perception, not in our initial thinking, and certainly not afterwards.
It's kind of funny because maybe McKinsey's different in that regard. So let's
Maybe.
talk a little. Let's talk a little bit about making it happen because I think a positive, a big kind of question from a lot of folks is how do you make this happen inside a large organization? So can you tell us a little bit about
Right.
how you pitched it? How did you convince people internally to give you the resources to do what you did? And what kinds of promises did you make?
Right. So, as I said, I've been a gamification evangelist since mid 2011, and ever since I tried to be able to do something with it, with gamification here. And obviously it took me a while, but and it took several attempts. But even if I mean, my advice always is you must keep trying. Even if your first attempt of trying to pitch a gamification concept doesn't get approved or accepted, just keep to it. It's really like a colleague once said that it's like throwing spaghetti against the wall. You keep doing it until some stick, and that is how I did it ultimately. Luckily, my boss's boss was when I pitched the idea about gamifying this testbed program. She was super supportive. She immediately loved the whole idea, all those ideas. I mean, we had tons of I had tons of ideas put down onto paper. We ended up doing maybe 15% of all those ideas, but it already obviously helped a lot. The other challenge that I had was how techy do I go with this one? Like do I start talking to, like, let's say the bunch balls and the matchables in order to do so? Because that would of course also mean, I would need a much larger budget, probably some development work would need to be done. We would have needed to put up infrastructure. But I mean, as we heard it, I think it was 2 weeks ago when Monica Cornetti was on, you can also gamify low tech or even no tech, or similar to John Guerrera, who gamified using post-it notes. So I did it actually by building a huge Excel spreadsheet. That is how I kept score. That is how I created the game mechanics and kept an overview over the leaderboard and the dynamics of it. And I just exported that leaderboard onto an intranet website every now and then when there was some movement. So so essentially, I did this with zero budget ultimately because all I needed was Excel, which I already had on my computer. And of course, now at the end of the year, we had to buy, or we decided to buy those rewards. But seeing the effect that this all had was that it was a small sacrifice, so to speak.
So what about if you can't do it with zero budgets? I think it's very clever to do a super hacky thing. And I often tell people, hey, Excel is your friend. Do what you can do in Excel and with paper and post-it notes and so on. But what if you legitimately couldn't do that? And what if you had to kind of go back? Now I assume in your next rev, right, you're able to go back and get more budget because you've already demonstrated some stuff. What advice
Right.
would you have if someone had to do something with like and actually get the investment? How might you pitch the sort of future potential of what you're doing? Like what did you promise you would do?
I think this, right. So the promise was that we would get people more engaged into the whole process and get more people to try out things and make the whole program more transparent to the participants, because that was one of the bits of feedback that we got over the past few years. Like people said, I don't even know, what you're doing with my feedback here, or with, why am I testing these things? Does it have any impact? Um, in my case, knowing how the typical consultant ticks was super helpful, because after, of course, also talking to a lot of them, I came to the result that what they're really looking for is the notion of being able to make an impact. And if you can give them that through whatever game mechanics you choose for your solution, it will make them come back to your solution. And that is what we did with the leaderboard and the feedback that they got. But in addition to that, we also introduced a structured approach to sending them, a thank you note. And actually, at the end of the year, we put together a chart with the type of impact that they actually had, um, what impact their testing had to all those products that they were able to try out.
So this is kind of interesting, right? Because I just want to go back to this. Like you're in the IT organization and you're doing stuff without software as a solution. How do you think about
Right.
the other side of this? How do you stop the scope from becoming so big? Many of the projects that I work on, when you introduce an idea to somebody, they start thinking about how you integrate it with the systems. For example, one of the projects I'm working on right now,
Right.
one of the big challenges is
Yeah.
when they want to track people's behavior, they want to build a completely passive system for behavior tracking. Their holy grail idea is they're going to track user behavior completely passively, like with cameras or Connect cameras or something crazy like that. How do you do the other side? How do you prevent the organization from adding to the scope so much that you can't actually execute that test?
Yeah. So as I said earlier, the initial concept that I presented, we did only like 10-15% of it. And at some point I really had to, stop my, the decision maker, because she was going, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And wouldn't it be fantastic if we did that? Um, it took some convincing, but at the end of the day, actually not too much, because I said, let's start slow. Let's start with tiny bits and pieces, and we'll go from there. And by simply only introducing the points in the leaderboard, it already had an effect. As I said, we're now ready to take the next step. We're actually looking into what type of online platform we could use for the next round. But yes, that is actually you have a valid point there. one other thing that is, I think, key is you should do a decent bit of user research. I mean, I do that for my projects anyway, meaning that I interview colleagues or run surveys and stuff like that to inform them on the right, for example, user customizations that we want to do with the product. This was no different. Like I did survey the entire group of those testers and asked them, how would you feel if we gamified the program? And of course, there were a couple of question marks on their faces first, but after briefly outlining what it was, 76% were either curious or excited about the outcome or about the idea, I should say. And then I also asked them about, how would you feel about different rewards, different game mechanics and stuff like that, just to get a baseline as to, whether it really makes sense to implement something like that or not. At the end of the survey, I asked them again, now, if we gamified the program, do you think you would participate more? And 72% yes. Having that kind of data definitely helps in convincing the right people, and maybe also convincing them to start with particular game mechanics or particular rewards, for example.
So it's very interesting, right? The question of what the employees think about and what their feedback is about the program is often an afterthought in the design, right? First, it's like we're doing the behavior change, and then there's the question, what do people actually think about this program after we've done it? How important do you think that it is to bake that that kind of employee feedback into the thing that you do? Like, so for this next round, and for other people, how integral do you think that? How does this make you feel? Does it improve the quality of your job? Would you be more likely to
So I can't hear you anymore right now, Gabe, but you're kind of breaking up. But I think I understood your question. And yes, you're right. It's sort of a double-edged sword because you want to get their opinion, but at the end of the day, maybe players don't always know what they really want, right? So, for example, in that initial survey, we asked them, what type of rewards would you be interested in? And 88% said, oh, we want a new firm-provided laptop faster than typical. And 72% said, I just want a gift card, right? Just give me $100 gift card. That's, would be sufficient. At the end of the program, we surveyed them again. Still, 94% said, new hardware or gadgets are fantastic. But now only 36% said that they wanted a gift card. So the value of what they initially thought they would want for this, activity dropped tremendously. It essentially fell flat. Now, I can tell we did not do any gift cards at the end of the day. And the type of rewards that we gave out were mostly gadgets, actually.
So in your program, the rewards were actually the most costly part of the program itself, right? If you were talking to other folks, what would you say would be the right kind of reward balance for the first test? Number one, and my second question for you is, you did a program that's mostly kind of PBL, and there's a lot of kind of pejorative sense about this. Can you talk about why maybe a PBL trial actually makes sense?
So I think PBL is great for a first introduction of gamification. It's probably not the right or the only game mechanic that you should rely on if you want to gamify something sustainably. But for this particular program, it was definitely the right choice. Simply because it allowed us to give that feedback to them much faster in a more direct manner. One of the other game mechanics, or I should say game elements, was we were also thinking whether we need a background story to the whole thing, right? And if you're looking at classic video games, there are video games that don't have a story, but which are super successful. I mean, like Tetris and Wii Sports, for example. Or you have video games which have a story, but where the story is rather negligible, like Super Mario, for example. I don't think it's that important that you're doing this to save the princess, I mean, you would still play it even if the objective was to get home before sunset, right? On the other hand, those video games which have a compelling story tend to be the ones that players enjoy maybe for a more prolonged time, which allow them to get deep into the game. Like I'm now talking about like role-playing games, for example. And I think for gamification, there can be both can be applied. You can have gamified apps with a story. You can have some without. For example, the Düsseldorf University, which is the university that I actually graduated from, where I did my master's degree, they gamified a one semester course for bachelor students. They came up with 153 quests, 75 achievements, and believe it or not, 600 written pages of storyline. Katrin Knaus, who's actually also joined the chat here, they created the content. She and her two colleagues, they created the content and then delivered this whole thing using an e-learning platform that they developed. And so they ran their course on knowledge representation, but called it The Legend of Xiren. And needless to say, it was a huge success with 150 students. And my understanding is that they're going to do this again. Now, having said that, a corporate environment may not be the best breeding ground for the story of an epic battle against an evil dragon. Obviously, it always depends on your target group. But I personally have made the experience that a story, if you present a story right away, that it can distract from the whole concept that you're trying to present. So we did, two colleagues of mine and I tried to pitch an idea. It was 1.5 years ago, and it had something to do with local check-ins, teamwork, competition. And we also introduced the background stories involving vampires and werewolves. And the whole concept was immediately dropped because we introduced it with this background story. So all they saw was, no, vampires and werewolves won't work with this. We're not going to do it. And even though we tried to convince them that this is only regarded a template, we can also do this with pirates and robots, or whatever you want to do. The idea fell entirely flat. So my personal advice is to try to focus on what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and what type of game mechanics you want to use for that. And then you can still later on attach a story to it if you want to.
So one last question for you, Sascha, before we run out of time, which I know is significant for an organization like McKinsey and probably to you. What about the global side of this? Can you speak a little bit to how your program needs to evolve, or how folks in a similar situation to you need to consider the global audience for a program like this, and how are you going to take this to the world?
So the program is actually already global. So those 160 participants, they are all across the globe. The fact that we did what we did last year did create a little buzz. So we have more and more people who want to join this quote unquote elite circle. And that is great. The experience that I have made is there is no huge difference as to how the program has been perceived across the globe. So if you look at Americas, EMEA, and Asia Pac, the amount of participation is comparable. So I for myself have not seen any huge difference there. Maybe that is because our firm culture. I don't know that, but so far that is the impression that I have.
Is there anything that you would do that you would recommend that people think about when they're first thinking about the global issue? Like, is it
Well,
always
as I
better to
said
start?
earlier,
Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I wanted to say you always need to have your target group in mind, definitely. I mean, after talking having talked to you and a lot of other things like Marigo, for example, and I have a similar impression that specific cultures are more open, maybe to the whole idea of gamifying. The Americans are typically, yeah, this sounds great, let's do this as soon as possible. Whereas if you're maybe talking to some Germans, they will say, yeah, this sounds kind of interesting, but have you done this before? And where's all the user research? And then again, other cultures may react totally differently to this. Luckily, as I said, with a program that I've gamified, I did not have any preconceptions or hesitation on that end. But again, there's certainly something that you need to keep in mind.
And that's awesome. And with that, we're kind of out of time. I know folks can follow you on Twitter
already.
at Sascha Goto.
Yes, please.
We put that up on the screen, and I hope that they do. There's so much cool stuff going on at McKinsey. Who would have thought I'd ever say that? Which is probably the most amazing thing that's come out of all of this. We get to think of you and McKinsey as a standard bearer for awesome engagement strategies. Thanks to you, Sascha. Thanks to everybody else for joining us today on the Gamification Revolution. Join us again next week at our regular time, Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern, where we'll have more guests on and talk more about the future of engagement. In the meantime, everyone, I'm your host, Gabe Zickerman. Check us out at G Summit and me on Twitter at GZickerm. See you all next week. Keep having fun, everybody. Ciao.
Thank you. Safe travels.